On a cold winter night, suddenly, I got a call on my cell phone from my mother-in-law. She ordered me to bring some kerosene for the stove from the warehouse outside to her room. Yeah, it's snowing so much right now. Deep down, I thought, I just got out of the bath and I'll catch a cold. And without responding immediately, my mother-in-law quickly threw words at me. What an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. An elderly person is cold because I can't get warm, and I'm asking for help. And in this snow, do you want the elderly to go outside? Don't you think it's dangerous? A useless daughter-in-law? My mother-in-law continued to complain over the phone. I wanted to tell my mother-in-law to consider the situation, but I gave up, thinking that it was pointless to argue over such a small thing. I put my son to bed and decided to head to the warehouse alone in the pouring snow. It's cold. Where was the kerosene again? It seems to be nowhere. As I was thinking that, I inadvertently let out a reek. The warehouse lights suddenly went out, plunging into darkness. Why? A blackout. I called out. I hurried to the exit door, but it wouldn't open, as if it had been locked from the outside. You've got to be kidding. Trapped. Did my mother-in-law do this? At that moment, I was enveloped in despair. I had no idea that this would lead to such an event. My story, Victoria. My name is Victoria, and I'm a 22-year-old housewife. I live with my husband and our 2-year-old son. When I was in 3rd grade, my father died in an accident. My mother, who was a housewife, had to start working, and she raised me and my sister alone, working an office job at a construction company. No matter how tough the days were, she never complained in front of us and was always smiling. Seeing my mother working so hard to not let us feel deprived, I decided to get a job right after middle school. My teacher and friends tried to persuade me, saying, "For your future, it's better to go to high school." But my decision did not change. I had decided not to go to high school. However, in the summer of my 3rd year of middle school, I decided to go to high school. The reason I changed my mind was that my mother wanted me to go. Knowing my mother's wish, I reconsidered my selfish thoughts and blamed myself. I'm sorry, Victoria. If I had worked harder and earned more, you could have decided to go to high school without any worries. While saying that, my mother cried. As far as I remember, the last time I saw her cry was at my father's funeral. Maybe my mom blames herself when I think too much about unnecessary things. Thinking that, I decided to go to high school, following my mother's wishes. And wanting to help the family finances even a little, I started working part-time as soon as I entered high school. That was when I met my husband. I met him at the grocery store where I worked part-time. He was a university student, 4 years older than me. And to us high school part-timers, he was like a reliable older brother. I was juggling part-time jobs at a grocery store and delivering newspapers. I spent busy days delivering newspapers early in the morning and working at the grocery store after school. Even as a high school student, there were moments when it was physically tough. During those times, my husband would take care of me and help me with work. He was kind and trustworthy, and I gradually became attracted to him. Then, as my husband graduated from university, he quit his part-time job. I took the plunge and confessed my feelings to him, and we started dating. After graduating from high school, I began working at a supermarket. About a year into my job, I discovered I was pregnant. When we told both sets of parents about the pregnancy, my in-laws opposed it, saying, "You're still young. It's too early to get married." At that time, my mother pleaded earnestly with my in-laws. My husband joined in the persuasion, and reluctantly, my in-laws gave us their blessing to get married. I turned 20, and at the same time, we got married. My husband has one younger brother. His parents doted on him as the eldest son, and it seemed difficult for them to accept me, who was raised by a single mother, as their precious son's wife. My mother-in-law showed an abnormal attachment to my husband, to a level I found unusual. Despite the marriage being decided, my mother-in-law confronted me saying, "You deliberately got pregnant first, didn't you? Cheater! We will never accept you as our daughter-in-law, never." I felt significant anxiety about the relationship with my in-laws after marriage. Our house was next to my husband's parents, and as soon as we decided to get married, they bought the vacant lot next door. And that's where we built our home. At the time, I frequently consulted with my husband, saying, "Don't you think we should carefully consider living next to your parents? They will have to be mindful of us being around all the time." Yet, my husband was nonchalant, saying, "What's the problem? They can help with the child, can't they?" I realized after marriage that my husband had quite a mother complex. Even when my mother-in-law made sarcastic remarks in my presence, my husband didn't care at all. While I was pregnant and supposed to be resting due to poor health, my mother-in-law approached me saying, "Even though my son is working hard, why are you just lying down? You're just skipping housework and sleeping. What do you think you're doing?" I couldn't stay silent and discussed it with my husband. "You know, the doctor told me to rest for a while. I don't want to come off the wrong way, so could you explain it to your mother? But it's the truth, right? You're lying down. I don't think Mom is wrong. It's a fact that you're not doing the housework." My husband didn't care about his wife's health and sided with his mother. I was astounded by his attitude. When I was working part-time at the convenience store, I thought of him as a reliable older brother figure, but now, my anxiety was growing because he was completely unreliable. Then, on a day when decades of heavy snow fell, an incident occurred. That day, my husband was late coming home from a drinking party, so I was preparing our son for bed. Suddenly, my mother-in-law called me on my mobile. "Victoria, are you free right now?" "Well, I'm getting the child ready for bed right now." "Oh, is that so? Sorry to bother you, but could you get some kerosene from the storage shed and bring it over? It's so cold, and we've run out of kerosene for the stove. I think I might freeze. And this heavy snow now?" While I hesitated, thinking, I just got out of the bath and don't want to catch a cold, my mother-in-law bombarded me with words. What an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. An old person can't get warm because it's so cold, and I'm asking for help. And you want an old person to go out in this snow? Don't you think it's dangerous? You're a useless daughter-in-law. As my mother-in-law continued to complain over the phone, I wanted to tell her to consider the situation, but I resigned myself, thinking it pointless to argue over trivial matters. I certainly would be in trouble if I couldn't use the stove in such cold weather. I thought, deciding to heed my mother-in-law's request. I put my son to bed and, as the snow fell heavily, decided to head to the storage shed alone. The shed was located between our house and my in-laws. Trembling with cold, I unlocked the door, turned on the light, and searched inside. I looked for kerosene where my mother-in-law had told me it would be, but I couldn't find it anywhere and was bewildered. Where could it be? The kerosene. Just as I thought to contact my mother-in-law, the lights went out in the shed, plunging it into darkness. Eek! What? No way! I involuntarily raised my voice in surprise. I hurried towards the exit, but it wouldn't open, as if it were locked from the outside. You can't be serious. Am I locked in? Did my mother-in-law do this? At that moment, I was enveloped in despair. After enduring endless insinuations and sarcasm, now this, I was deeply disappointed from the bottom of my heart. It was a day of heavy snowfall, said to occur once in decades. Even inside the shed, it was below freezing without heat. I realized that being trapped for a long time could be life-threatening. And I was also worried about my son, who was at home alone. Reluctantly, I decided to call my husband, who was at a drinking party. Yeah, it's me, what's up? My husband sounded drunk, probably due to the drinking party. I'm sorry to bother you during your party, but I need help. I'm locked inside the shed. I explained the situation to my husband and asked for help, without showing any sign of concern. Come on, I told you I'm at a party. You probably just didn't look around properly and lock the door yourself. It might do you good to cool down in there for a bit. He dismissed my plea without really listening, blaming me for the predicament. Fine, I won't consult with you anymore. It was my mistake to rely on you for help. Whatever happens now, I don't care. Angry at his response, I shouted and hung up the phone. I was foolish to rely on such a hopeless husband. I gave up relying on my husband and began to think of ways to escape on my own. Even though it was pitch dark inside the shed, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I began to make out my surroundings. Looking around, I saw something like a window in the back. I rushed over to find that the window had bores, making it impossible to escape. I can't get out this way. Disheartened, I went back to the door. The shed had only one entrance, which, upon rechecking, remained firmly shut and unopenable. It seemed I was completely trapped, but I desperately searched for a way out. This might be impossible until morning. Shivering with cold, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. It was difficult to move my hands due to the cold, but I managed to take out my cell phone from my pocket, thinking of calling the police as a last resort. As I desperately tried to touch the screen, I suddenly heard a noise and instinctively stopped to listen carefully. Huh? Is that the voice of the neighbors? From the street outside, I could hear people talking. The voices were familiar. They belonged to the elderly couple next door. I thought it was my last chance, so I shouted, desperately trying to get their attention. Excuse me, I'm here. After shouting several times, the elderly neighbors finally noticed and responded. Are you in the storage? Are you all right? The couple asked loudly and worriedly in front of the storage. Someone locked me in here, and I can't get out. Could you please open the door from outside? I pleaded with them, half in tears. The neighbors, saying this is serious, hurried to pry the door open. Once safely outside, I cried with relief. The elderly couple seemed to understand the gravity of the situation after seeing my state. They suggested that I stay at their house for the night since I was so unsettled. Gratefully, I decided to stay with them, along with my son. According to the couple, my in-laws' house had a bad reputation in the neighborhood for mistreating their daughters-in-law. Previously, the wife of my brother-in-law was also locked in the storage, which led to a major commotion between him and his parents. Because of that incident, the neighbors have been worried about me as well. Though I was a stranger to them, I thanked them for their concern and help. Perhaps because I had been locked in the storage in the snow for a long time. I was at my physical and mental limits, and that night I fell into a deep sleep. The next day, I woke up to some noisy sounds coming from outside. I quickly changed clothes, left my son with the elderly couple, and went outside. There was a crowd in front of my family's house. What's happening? Approaching the crowd, I saw that ambulances and police had arrived. Surprised, I rushed into my home. Upon entering, my husband shouted angrily at me. "Where have you been at a time like this? Coming back now," he yelled with tremendous anger. "Didn't I call you last night? I told you I was locked in the storage." The couple next door helped me, and since I was feeling anxious, they let me stay overnight. I explained the situation, but my husband's anger did not subside. According to him, my mother-in-law had collapsed in the storage, and she was found early in the morning. She must have gone to check what had happened to me after dawn. Last night, locked in the storage, I had desperately searched for tools that could help me escape. Of course, the work in the dark must have left the storage in disarray. Then, in the dim light before sunrise, my mother-in-law entered the storage. Unaware of a ball rolling at her feet, she tripped, hit her head, and collapsed. Though she was found and taken to the hospital, she unfortunately passed away due to the severity of her injury. My husband and father-in-law blamed me, accusing me. "It's your fault for making a mess. Take responsibility." Even when I explained the harassment for my mother-in-law and the fact that I had been intentionally locked in the storage last night, they wouldn't listen. There's nothing more I can do. Disgusted, I decided to divorce and leave the house with my son. My brother-in-law seemed to understand how I felt and said, "Dad and brother are a bit crazy. It's natural for Victoria to leave. I also can't stand what's been done to my wife and the attitude towards Victoria. So I'll cut ties with you as a family." Then my father-in-law and husband, in a fury, began to yell and shout. "You all talk about divorce and cutting family ties on your own, but don't think such a thing is possible. I will not agree to a divorce. After all, you're the one who staged the whole warehouse incident to make my mother look bad, right? Dishonorable. Be grateful that I'm still registered as your husband. Yet, my resolve to divorce did not change. I'm truly sorry about your mother's passing. However, I can't forgive her for the harassment she directed at me. There's irrefutable evidence that I was locked in the warehouse. I recorded it on video. If necessary, I'll submit it to the police, okay?" As she said this, she took out her phone. "Don't joke with me. Phones can be destroyed, you know? If it's broken, it won't serve as evidence," he ranted, refusing to acknowledge the murderous intent behind his mother's actions toward me. I was nothing but astounded by my husband's attitude and his remarks. Actually, My sister got married recently. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it was necessary. Her husband is a liar. Considering the harassment I've endured and the psychological trauma from being locked in the storage, which I have on video, I plan to file for divorce and demand compensation. Upon hearing this, the husband's face turned pale. Wait, your sister's husband is a liar. Compensation. Hey, that's a joke, right? I admit that my mother went too far by locking you in the storage. I think it was an accident. I will apologize properly for everything. So sorry. But let's not talk about divorce. Can we discuss this again, please? My husband pleaded desperately. I had been seeking a divorce, but for some time, my husband stubbornly refused to agree. My mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law came to persuade my husband and father-in-law to agree to the divorce. My mother begged my husband and father-in-law for a divorce, just as she had done when I got married. It was clear that their side of the story wouldn't hold up in court. After all, photographic evidence had also been taken. My husband and his family had to admit their wrongdoing and reluctantly agree to the divorce, signing the divorce papers. Finally, the divorce was finalized, and I was awarded custody of their son. I took my son and returned to my parental home. On the day, I was locked in the dark, freezing storage amid a heavy snowfall. I didn't feel fear because I was so focused on escaping and protecting my son. However, now living a stable life and reflecting on that day, I am often struck by panic and tears. With the support of my sister and brother-in-law, I decided to demand compensation from my husband and father-in-law. The video of the incident in the storage and the testimony of neighbors supported her claims, and my arguments were recognized. Initially, my husband and father-in-law insisted, "We will not give up custody of the child." However, I said, what would have happened to me that day if the neighbor hadn't helped me? If the child had lost his mother, he would have been psychologically scarred. I cannot let people who would casually inflict such harm on a child raise him. After this, my husband and father-in-law fell silent. Afterward, they said nothing more about the custody of my son. All negotiations after the divorce were left to my sister's husband. According to the sister's husband, after I left the house, rumors spread even further in the neighborhood of the in-laws' home that it was a house known for mistreating brides. And my husband and father-in-law received cold looks from those around them. Furthermore, when my husband's boss heard the rumors, he demanded an explanation and inquired about the circumstances leading to the divorce. Enraged that my husband had ignored my plea for help on a snowy day to go to a drinking party, the boss demoted him. My husband, whose position at the company became precarious, decided to resign. It became difficult for him and his father-in-law to stay in the company and the local area. So they decided to sell their house and land and move to a different area. Following this incident, my brother-in-law and his wife also completely cut ties with my in-laws' family. On the other hand, I returned to my family home with my son and started a joint life with my mother. I asked my mother to reduce her work and take care of my son. She was delighted, exclaiming, "I'm truly happy to spend time with my grandson." And so, I decided to work as an office assistant at my sister's husband's firm. At the age of 20, having married early and spent time as a homemaker, the experience of working and earning money on my own was fresh and enjoyable. to ease the burden on our mother, who has worked tirelessly for us sisters without a second thought for her own life. I will work hard and earn more from now on. With that thought, I naturally became motivated. Furthermore, through my sister's husband, I met a lawyer and started dating him. He is more than 10 years my senior, but is a very kind and gentle man. My son also feels close to him, and on holidays, the three of us often go out together. We are thinking about getting married next year, and we are currently building a new home. This new house coincides with the timing of his starting his law firm, and will serve as both an office and a residence. Moreover, this kind man is also considerate towards my mother. And the new home will be designed for 2 generations to live together. I'm filled with gratitude toward my mother, who has always supported my sister and me by herself. I am spending happy days with my family, and we will always be together.